I think I'm always a Canadian at heart. I was born here, raised here. My roots are definitely here. I think that a lot of my writing is influenced by that experience.
Sylvia Tyson is a true Canadian treasure. She was a folk music pioneer as one half of Ian and Sylvia. She's been honored with the Order of Canada, as well as membership in several halls of fame. The first song she ever wrote was a worldwide hit. She's hosted programs on both CBC radio and television. She co-founded the Songwriters Hall of Fame, as well as the group Quartet. So where did all her incredible talent spring from?
Both of my parents were musical. My mother was trained as a classical pianist from the time she was about 5, and she was an organist and choir leader. So you can imagine where I spent a good part of my young life, in the choir stalls.
Sylvia Ann Fricker was born and raised in Chatham, Ontario. Her early musical influences were the rhythm and blues songs she heard on late-night radio from Detroit. Then one day, that changed.
I'm not quite sure how that happened, except that I had an older sister who started bringing home books from the library that were folk music books. And I would say that most of the early folk music that I got into for books because there weren't really any recordings. And living in Chatham, Ontario, I didn't get to hear much of that.
In 1959, Sylvia moved to Toronto and quickly became part of the folk music scene, along with her singing partner, a handsome young cowboy named Ian Tyson.
Ian and I were kind of the Kansas City stars in Toronto. And I think that at a certain point we realized that we didn't want to just play in Toronto, we wanted to be playing outside of Toronto. And at that point, in the Canadian market, there weren't that many places to play. So we decided we needed to attempt to hit the big time and went down to New York. Pretty much the first door we knocked on was that of Albert Grossman's. So we auditioned for Albert right in the middle of the floor in this huge office that he had on Central Park West. As I recall, his response was, well, I really like what you do, but I've just signed this trio and I don't know how much time I'm going to have for you. And that, of course, was Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Albert Grossman did sign Ian and Sylvia and continued to manage them throughout their career together.
The criticism against Albert, I think, at that time and later on, had to do with the fact that he was a businessman in a very unbusinesslike era of music. And I'm eternally grateful to him for being just that, because he certainly saw to it that we not just had good management, but a good agency, a record company, legal advice, and financial advice as well.
Ian and Sylvia had been a couple for a few years, but it took a little prodding from Ian's mother to make it legal.
Marriage was really not on my mind at that point, but Ian had taken a trip home to visit his mom, and she basically said, "How about it?" And he came back and said, "I guess we're getting married."
In New York, Ian and Sylvia lived in a Greenwich Village apartment and hung out mainly with fellow musicians. One of their friends was a young singer-songwriter from Minnesota who called himself Bob Dylan.
You know, knowing Bob Dylan as we did, who was, of course, extraordinarily prolific, even at that point, he was just this guy that we knew that wrote songs, and if he could write songs, we could write songs. So we all started writing at that point, and as luck would have it, Ian's Four Strong Winds was Ian's first song, and mine was You Were on My Mind. And I still get plaintive calls from my accountant asking me if I could write another one of those.
When I woke up this morning, you were on my mind.
You Were On My Mind was a top 5 hit for the group We Five, who added a rock beat to the song.
I got troubles, oh, I got worries, oh.
They also changed a couple of Sylvia's original words.
You know, I wasn't that happy that they had done that, but I absolutely understood why they did it, because radio at that point would not use the words drunk and sick in a song. So, you know, no hard feelings, but it wasn't the way I wrote it.
I got drunk and I got sick and I came home again.
Hey, I bless them for it. It's still paying the rent.
As musical tastes changed in the late 60s, so did Ian and Sylvia's sound. Out of a Nashville recording session in 1969, the Great Speckled Bird emerged.
We decided that we didn't want to go on the road again, and yes, unless we could sound the way we sounded on that record. And out of that grew the Great Speckled Bird.
Ian and Sylvia recorded over a dozen albums together. Since their split and subsequent divorce in the mid-70s, Sylvia's released nearly that many solo records. She's also recorded with and performed with Quartet, a group she co-founded in 2000.
We all got together and we realized as we were running material that we all knew each other's stuff and that we were all harmony singers. And we started singing on each other's stuff and it started to sound pretty good. So that's what we did.
Ian and Sylvia performed at the very first Mariposa Folk Festival in 1961. For the 50th anniversary in 2010, they were booked as separate acts, but the audience wanted more.
The anticipation in the air was very heavy, although Ian and I were not scheduled to perform together. So when I came off stage from doing my show in the evening concert, Ian was there, standing there listening to what I was doing, and I just turned to him and I said, I think we have to do this, you know. And he said, okay, I'll call you up when we start, and that's what happened. I have to say there wasn't a dry eye in the house except for Ian's and mine.
When it comes to retirement, Sylvia Tyson just doesn't see that in her future.
I think it's true that people who are doing creative work, and probably people who are doing work that we wouldn't consider creative, but who enjoy their work. I mean, why would you retire if it's not forced upon you? I'll probably still be limping out on stage when I'm in my 90s if they allow me to do it.